it out, but
Okay. What did you see?
Did you guys see what happened with Kristen Sinema and Gawker? Did you
No.
see that? Gawker published all of her information, her social security, like they doxed her.
No.
They went to her divorce records. She's a senator, for those who don't know, but they found her divorce records and they published all of it. Like they published a bunch of crap in there. They didn't publish, I guess, her phone number, but they published, like they have her social security number and all sorts of stuff. Like I think it's incredible. Like it's really low. I don't know why somebody would want to do that. And so they're saying, well, we don't know what she's voting on or what she's about or whatever. And I mean, that's just a line that I don't think anybody should cross. So it's pretty brutal. And it's Gawker. I mean, it's not like, it's a widely read, but not widely regarded news source. But there you go. It's there.
yeah, the SoftBank deal with ARM and Nvidia is in the tank, basically. There's no life there no more, I should say.
I think, I guess they got worried about, the ARM over regulations in the US especially. So at least that's what BBC is saying, why that deal fall apart.
No. So, Messi, what is that? You said you wanted to talk about Canada?
She's on the phone now.
Yes, that was the truckers taking
Yeah.
over the areas is having a lot of problems and spreading all over the world now. Yeah.
Okay.
Tyler, the other one that I was going to bring up is the alleged $100 million contract from Rumble to move Joe Rogan over.
Oh,
I shared that yesterday.
Yeah, hold on. Let me plug in my speaker so everyone can hear you, Matt. Hold on. Matt, can you count to 5, please?
1,
There you go.
2, 3.
Good enough. So, what's this? Somebody's offering Joe Rogan to leave Spotify. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, they just said basically if you want to not be canceled, we're going to sign a 4-year, $100 million contract for you to bring all of your content over to Rumble.
Uh-huh.
So more in the context of just mass platform audience disruption. So I don't know when Joe gave that, and I don't listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, but when he gave that apology, and this is what I was going to chime in yesterday before I had to jump to another call. Just there was something, just I don't know, kind of a sixth sense or cat in the canary. Just looked like it was part of the message, but it looked like he had something. It sensed to me like he had something else up his sleeve. I'm not sure if he was in cahoots with Rumble. I don't even know if he has an appetite to go over there and move his content there. But thought I'd call that out for the group.
Yeah, I don't think Joe is in any. Joe signed a contract with Spotify.
Yeah, they're not letting him out of that deal.
Not letting him out of that deal. And
yeah,
I think that Rumble knows that, and so Rumble found a very clever way to get themselves in the news for free, get some free
right.
PR value is what that sounds like to me. And in a way that fits perfectly with their objectives, which is they want to be known as kind of the uncancelable platform or whatever. What's his name? The guy who really, he's a podcaster, really developed a name as the kind of the leading atheist. Sam Harris, who's a friend of Joe Rogan's, just published an episode, for lack of a better word, on his take on his friend Joe Rogan's apology. And interesting take, as always, from Sam, and he's himself rather fearless in expressing his thoughts. Anyway, the whole bunch of interesting topics to go over, and we can go through the top 10, but as we often do, kind of as a warm-up, everyone can have a spin on the mic if they like. If there's something they want to share, make sure that they want to, something they think the rest of us should know about.
Hi, Tyler. It's Austin here.
Yeah,
I just wanted to bring to your attention, I put it out on Twitter with tech news around the world.
Yeah.
But a Fudan University bioengineering people have developed a a COVID test which does as good as PCR, but in 4 minutes, within 4 minutes. I put it out, and it's published in a Nature Biomedical Engineering journal. So it's quite high impact. The 25 is the impact factor of the journal. So it's pretty good.
So
and it's been peer reviewed. So anyway, I just thought it may open up an opportunity, unless it's patented, to open. Someone should go and read it, and with the tech people with the background, it could be spun not just in China but around the world. That's
when you say that it's as good as a PCR test. Is in who's saying that? Is it?
I mean, it's the journal. It's a news in. Oh, sorry, I should say, what's it called? South Morning Post.
Yeah, South China Morning Post.
Yeah, that's the one. They're the ones who are saying it.
Well, okay. Well, is it based?
It's said by the Fudan University. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't read the original paper yet.
Okay. Based on that article, do you think that it's likely that a 4-minute new alternative to the PCR test would come out?
Yeah. So they're using a very different approach.
Okay.
They're using like those, like the same technology as the flow, lateral flow type thing, but by using DNA. They believe that DNA conducts electricity. And so what they're saying is that this device, they've developed a device, can be also connected to smartphones. So you could do it anywhere. So I don't know. I haven't looked at the data. But it's a peer-reviewed publication, which in one of the leading top journals, if not number one, in the bioengineering space.
I've got it right here, thanks to BB. She found your tweet that Chinese scientists invent a COVID-19 test that gives results in 4 minutes and is as accurate as PCR tests. Now, stop there, because that would be fantastic. The question is, how likely is that to happen? Because PCR tests take, here in Thailand, it will take you a minimum 30 minutes, usually more like an hour or two. And a 4-minute version would be a blessing for travelers, essentially. And it would be huge for countries and immigration and all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
So it says rapid detection test is easy to use anywhere. The work is published by the journal Nature Biomed from Fudan University, which BB, where does that rank on Chinese universities?
Fudan
is
Shanghai,
one of the top 10 in China.
In Shanghai, yeah.
Shanghai, I know the president of the Fudan University, and he used to be president of Sun Yat-sen University, and he's very research promoter, and he's a researcher himself, and an engineer. So I think they're a good university.
Okay, well, fingers crossed we could get some adoption on a 4-minute version of the medically high-end test that everyone needs to get certified for travel and all that kind of stuff. Christian is back.
But Tyler,
yes,
last year there are already a few countries who also announced the 1-minute test, right? So I don't think.
Yeah, that's not the issue. There's the hundreds of tests. The issue is getting the FDA to say we can now use this for government-related protocols and procedures, like allowing people in through immigration, yada yada yada. So
yeah, that's the challenge.
That's the challenge, right? So that's where, fingers crossed. Christian Landgren, who was himself in the news regularly over the past few months, is on stage in the Twitter space and met the regular tech newsers, who, by the way, we're on 2 apps, Christian. You're on the Twitter app. We have currently 223 people in the Clubhouse app, and that'll nearly double in the next 20 minutes. And then we've got Jeremiah's back, and I don't know, 40 or 50 people over in the Twitter app, and fingers crossed that'll double in the next 20, 30 minutes. So, but now that Christian's here, it's a unique opportunity to get an update on what he's doing, because last we spoke, we were in person on stage at my event in Stockholm, where we had a conversation about the huge Wired article that he was kind of the featured character of, detailing his battle again with his app versus the Swedish school system, who was in some, believe it or not, I mean, sabotage sounds like a strong word, but that's kind of the accurate word in this case. They were kind of trying to sabotage him and really work against him in a really, regrettable way, like a concerning way. And I have to say, that was a really insightful conversation exchange that we had on stage at the live event. And I recall Ellen was in the audience. By the way, there was quite a few regular Tech Newsers who were in the audience. I believe our friend Carl was in the audience. I believe Swedbliss was in the audience. That might have even been the one where Ame was in the audience, actually. Flew in from Amsterdam, God bless her. We had dinner afterwards. Anyway, Christian, welcome back. And could you give us an update on what's going on with your endless challenges with the school, making a better mousetrap school app for the residents, the fine parents and children of Sweden?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm sorry for not being around for quite some time. This is actually the first time I'm trying the Twitter space, so I'm not sure if I'm doing it wrong or if I'm live now to everyone, so or how that works. But anyway, so thank you for having me.
Yeah.
But yeah, the updates is actually it's right now we have come to pretty much a kind of an equilibrium between the different forces around this app. I think the city of Stockholm has pretty much accepted that we are something that they have to understand is legal and available for everyone to use. So that's good. They haven't sabotaged anything more, so that's also good. So now we're actually working together with quite a few municipalities in Sweden to start using the app. We have one really interesting case where the city itself has decided to adapt the open source code to work with their own school platform, because they realize that they are too small for us to kind of do it ourselves. So they do the work by themselves instead. So that's really an interesting development. It's Alingsås. And Sundsvall is also really, really interested in open source programming and development, and have followed this for a long time. So they have similar ideas. And so it's starting to grow quite an interesting development here from this very, very sad start, if you would say.
Right, yeah. Really. Well, it's a very peculiar, bizarre start, you would even say. And let me backtrack just for a second for those who missed this really bizarre story, but very relevant story to the future of app development, actually. And that's why I want to get the update. And now I'm realizing, as you give us this update, that looking forward, you are in a far better position than the Stockholm school municipality is, because you can, as an entrepreneur, kind of scale it and make it available to other school districts in a much more fluid manner than they probably can.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And we have already developed the app together with the parents from Gothenburg.
Right.
So now the app works perfectly in Gothenburg.
Right. And now you're going to start. That what happens now is you're going to start running circles around them. This is the beauty of the private enterprise. It generally can run circles around government run initiatives of this type. So this is a really interesting case study that governments everywhere should kind of take note of. So let me backtrack, if you don't mind me, Christian. I know it's boring to you, but for those who missed this very viral Wired story, it was one of the biggest stories about, I want to say 6 weeks ago, yeah? And this
Tyler, I've actually seen that now in the print version of Wired, it's running again. So if anyone are interested to also, and there in that story, it also have quite a few updates since the online version came along 6 weeks ago, something like that.
Right. Yeah. They made it a kind of a profile feature piece in the print version and everything. I mean, it was one of their more viral stories they've had in a while. And God bless them that they reached out to you and that they heard about this, and exposed this openly. And I no doubt this was wildly embarrassing to the Stockholm school folks who were kind of not cooperating. I imagine there's a bit of embarrassment there, which in Swedes go to great lengths to avoid situations like that, being embarrassed like that. But in America, we're kind of immune to that type of embarrassment, so I have to explain why that's even relevant. But what happened was Stockholm's school municipality, the city municipality that oversees the schools, hired a big digital agency from Finland who they paid very, 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 very handsomely to make an app for the kids and the parents and the teachers. Makes sense. Great. I mean, that's great. What a fantastic initiative. Turns out the amount was obscene, honestly. There's no other word for it. And it didn't really work as advertised. In fact, it worked very poorly. In fact, it was very poorly rated by a lot of parents and users of the app. I mean, this is just facts. This is just, So Christian, as one of the parents in that school district, said, I could make a way better app just tapping into the APIs and the data, and I'm going to go ahead and do it because it needs to be done, because the students and the vision was fine. The execution was very poor, and everyone deserves to have such an app. So let's do this. And he jumped in and did this. And that's where the school jumped in and started opposing him in multiple ways, and to avoid potential embarrassment. But that, in fact, that kind of just exacerbated the whole issue. And then Wired got ahead of the story, and it is what it is. And what do you know? The parents love Christian's version of the app, and the other people that he works for. I call it Christian's, but it's obviously nobody in Sweden is a one-man band, and they're all very modest and everything. So now my point is when I said, can you give us an update post-Wired article? Because we were on stage together at my event, like right when the Wired article came out. And the update is, well, what do you know? Other school districts want to use his version. Wow, what a surprise. And guess what? He can do that because he's, not a government, this is the beauty of the private market and being an entrepreneur. And, he's built it in a way, he probably even had that in mind while he was building it, that, other school systems might want to use this. And sure enough, they do. And this could be great for everybody. And it can be done at way, 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 way less cost than what the city was previously doing the app. And that's all come to light. And so much has come to light as a result of this brouhaha. And
yeah, and I just wanted to add also to the story that the reason why this works is that we decided to both make it as a paid app, so we can make it as a company and as an entrepreneur, and we can continuously support the development for it, but also because of that we made it available as open source, which means that every parent that has a lousy school app, which turns out pretty much is the whole, not only Sweden, but pretty much everywhere. When you have apps designed for schools, they tend to be really lousy. And if you have that somewhere in the world, you can actually you can take our code and you just develop your own adapter from your school's APIs and then convert that into a format that our apps expects. And that's the only thing you need to do. And then from that on, you can have like updates from your school, you can have push notifications, you can have the calendar updated, like everything you expect from a modern app. Those things can be available to you, even though that your school has an app that has has very limited amount of features and UX, but in the background, pretty much everywhere you have an API. So the only thing you need to do from the other school districts in Sweden, you just have to find one or two parents that have access to that school's particular APIs, and they can build a very small adapter between those APIs and our app, and that's the only thing you have to do, and then the rest will just work automatically, which is amazing, and that tells also a story on how we can collaborate between kind of the tech sector and the public sector, because if the public sector stops developing these really, really lousy apps that cost a huge amount of money and usually are not developed with users in mind, with the UX process, they can start developing APIs instead, and then let the market take care of all the different front end development that is much more suitable for the market to take care of, rather than having those things developed with the procured process, which is often really, really hard to use in terms of developing these types of innovations.
Right. Well, because traditionally cities have to go with these very high-paid mega agencies that charge incredibly high rates, and they are in the business of servicing those municipalities and know that they will pay very, very high rates, and it's like government contract work, and it's ridiculous, and it doesn't need to be that way. Anyway, it's a really lesson-filled case, and thank you to Cheryl for pinning it at the top of the Clubhouse room, the Wired article. These parents built a school app, then the city called the cops. What a great headline. Yeah, that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and great to hear about the update. I predict that app could be huge, absolutely huge. And I imagine there's tons of school districts, because it wouldn't be that hard to rejigger it for American schools and American school districts. I worked for LA Unified School District. They should have it, and
exactly, and that's exactly what I mean. So the app itself is actually already translated to English, and it's in like 18 other languages as well. So and most schools have pretty much the same information going back and forth between the school and the parents. Right. So it's about like the updates and what your kids' homework and what's the schedule for this week and things like that. So those are quite universal. So my dream would be that this app would start moving outside of Sweden now, maybe in the Nordics, but also other European countries. But the limits are nowhere there. So it could definitely pop up some adapter from a school in Los Angeles for sure.
Let's take
and Christian, if Tyler predicts, it usually comes out to be true.
I know.
So maybe I might, Christian. Maybe we should do a digital fika, and because I have friends who are brilliant digital marketers who we could figure out the kind of the traditional kind of marketing cost to get it in the hands of targeting the right people in the right school districts, and find out how if the model works. I think this could be a huge success story. And
can I ask a question, Tyler?
I will just say I'm in LA, and we're in the Beverly Hills School District, but there are already a number of apps that actually integration is really more the issue out here. There are a number of apps that provide a variety of information, both directly from teachers to parents, and then regard organization and better than simple newsletters and stuff like that. And there is a set of new platforms that have come out here in the U.S. And there's some variety because here there's also a very big charter school and private school movement. So there's a variety of other apps that have come out already. So it's actually becoming quite a saturated market. And it's essentially the same problem. What I look at it as is the same problem as what's happening with electronic medical records, right? A lot of these things don't integrate well. They don't speak to earlier iterations or anything like that. So there's this constant updating process, and And there isn't really, like, if you have kids in different schools, which is quite often the case, there isn't a way to make that easier. And even like, I don't really know why there's no integration into like Google Calendar or Outlook or something like that. None of that happens. So it's a messy market, but and I'm sure that this would help. The problem right now is within the last 5 years, most school districts have already spent a significant amount of money purchasing platforms and apps to use for these various purposes. So to reallocate would be an issue. So
yeah. And that's a really, really good point. And that, and we get this a lot from different parents. Like, I have one kid in one school, and I have another kid in another school, and they have completely different systems. What our app can make of that is that we provide an adapter. So if anyone have the time to create a small adapter from both of those two school apps, you can see all your kids in the same app, and the rest of the integration could be made on your own device. So if you have Google Calendar, or you use iPhone calendar, or whatever you do, our app can talk to those calendars instead. So we can do those integrations on the phone itself. So we don't need to come identify your account and connect it back on the back end side. We can do it on the front end side, which is pretty much the whole idea of this the security solution we have provided.
Christian, just as Asif, I'm sitting next to you on Twitter. I just wanted to, if you could DM me or something, I want to introduce you to the leader of the council under whose schools are regulated, so that you can, this sounds like something, as Tyler says, every country and every city should look into it. If I don't know what the systems are of operating, my kids are grown up, but it'll be good to connect you to a couple of political leaders in my country, in England.
Sure. All right, perfect. All right. I'll send you a DM. Perfect.
Okay, yeah. Cheers, thanks, bye.
Christian, this is David over on the Clubhouse side. Good work. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on the business model. You mentioned open source, and we all know the problem was just these monolithic contracts and things like that. So can you elaborate more on, I mean, are parents charged anything, or can you elaborate a little bit more on what the business model looking forward would look like?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the app costs just $1, which is feels like almost nothing, of course. But if we get the volume and make this integrated in all the different school districts in Sweden, and then expand out from there, we have kind of every year there's new kids and new parents, and all of them needs to download this app. So that's pretty much the business model to just scale it up, and then charge almost nothing, because the schools, right, even though it just costs $1 here in Sweden, you are not allowed from the school to recommend something to the parent that costs money, which makes no sense, because the kids needs a lot of things that cost money. But they have been, and this is really ridiculous hold that they have, that the schools aren't allowed here in Sweden, even now, they aren't allowed to recommend the parents download this app. They need to figure this out by themselves. But eventually that's that's going to happen. So this is becoming the standard, hopefully, and then everyone can download the app and purchase it. So that's the basic idea of the business model. Then of course you could change that to subscription model, and you can do a lot of different things. But the idea is rather to solve the problem, and using open source is both kind of means to do that, because this is to create all of these adapters. It takes a lot of work, and the only way to do it is to actually have kids in that particular school to be able to because often you don't have API documentations. You have to reverse engineer everything. So what we need all the time is some parent that lives in that school district that can provide this adapter to the open source code that we have. So that's the kind of idea, that we use open source as a way to solve this problem, and then have a very easy, simple business model for charging a very small fee for one-time fee for the parents.
Very cool.
It's interesting with this because I feel like England has the same problem around just educational software and just bettering apps for edtech, which is, and it's more for the parents, right? It's not necessarily edtech, but it helps with edtech as well. And with what Asif said, as also, it seems that he's already got that covered for you, but I see it working all around Europe in most places, right? It just seems where you are and where we are in England, it works the best here, but I'm not necessarily sure about the rest of Europe.
So I think,
Can I just make a request for this? If you do this in the U.S.,
yeah.
could you put part of that app, the part of the app, is like, or like an opt-in, so that everybody who is a parent in a particular class has like a chat, because that's like the worst thing all the time is trying to figure out who the parents are. All the parents usually have to talk to each other for one thing or another. So if you could do something where everybody who has it, automatically, like, because right now mostly runs on WhatsApp chats. So if there's any way to integrate like parents in a particular class, like maybe anonymized or whatever, but all the parents in one chat, that would be so helpful. So helpful. Please do that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you so much for that. That's actually what I'm working on right now. I'm integrating with the open source protocol called Matrix. It has a cool sounding name, and it's actually really cool. It has the same security mechanisms as Signal, so it's fully encrypted, end-to-end encrypted, and that's so we're going to use that and integrate that into the app. So for each kid you can just chat to the whole class, to all the parents in the class, but also provide a secure way of communicating between you as a parent with the teacher, because that's also a big problem, because most of these systems don't have a secure way to communicate, which means that they have to rely on email, and email is, as you know, unencrypted, so that means that you can't really discuss personal matters. And here in Europe you have the GDPR, which makes all of these problems even worse. So that ends up, having instead of having email conversations about these different things that require the teacher to schedule a time to talk with the parents, which makes a lot of extra work for just finding time. So this is a whole big problem. So we are actually working on this right now. And there's also another type of business model idea we can use to, when you collect the money for gifts to the teachers and things like that, we can also help to facilitate that on through the app itself. So there's a lot of different ideas that are floating around right now about those things. But yeah, we're working on it.
This is Alexandra. If you connect with me or ping me, or I'm in the Clubhouse part of this, I'm happy to chat with you, because there are several different
Please go
things
to
that are integrated.
my Twitter account. I'm Landgren, LANDGREN on Twitter. Just ping me there, so I'm not missing you.
Alrighty, we got to move on to other topics, and do circle back, Christian, and keep us updated, because it seems like you're going to start picking up the pace here potentially, which I hope you do. And the next, we're going to jump into the top big stories, actually. But before we do, I have a request of everybody in the Twitter space. If you could keep your eyes open for somebody named Rami, Rami, who is an old dear friend of mine, who happens to be in the Foo Fighters, who happens to be in one of the upcoming stories. So I went ahead and pinged him to let him know we're going to be talking about the Foo Fighters playing the Super Bowl, and would love to get his little quick thoughts about playing the Super Bowl. And but I need somebody to keep an eye out for him, because he's actually kind of a shy guy. Rami Jaffe is his name. Anyway, so let's get into the topic.
Tyler, he's going to be on Twitter or Clubhouse?
I invited him via Twitter, so that because he has a Twitter account, I don't even know if he has a Clubhouse account. We normally talk through our old Facebook account. I know he has an Instagram account because we follow each other on Instagram as well, but I invited him via Twitter. So
okay.
keep an keep an eye on Twitter for somebody named Rami Jaffe, Jaffee. Okay, so air horn, please. We'll go through the top stories. Welcome back, Sid and Nicholas and Jeremiah and everybody over in the Twitter space. And now we're up to, as promised, approaching 300 folks at Clubhouse, and then we're probably approaching 100 in Twitter, which is great. So the top story today is that Nvidia and SoftBank call off Nvidia's ARM acquisition following regulatory scrutiny. ARM CEO Simon Segars resigns. Didn't necessarily see that part coming. Replaced by ARM IP Group President Rene Haas. Nvidia's deal to acquire ARM is off. The two companies and ARM's owner, SoftBank, announced just recently. And there's a sister story from Bloomberg that says SoftBank's Masayoshi-san, who's the big boss over there at SoftBank, who is the big investor in ARM, says he's planning a U.S. IPO for ARM in March 2023, so a year from now, following the failure of the Nvidia deal. SoftBank keeps a $1.25 billion breakup fee. Interesting. Didn't know that was part of their clause, but very clever. And the reason this deal fell apart, there might be multiple reasons, but the obvious reason is that regulators didn't want it to happen, essentially. I mean, we've been tracking this story for months when Nvidia said they wanted to buy ARM, and you could hear the sounds of other players in the semiconductor space screaming bloody murder to not let that go through. And no doubt they took all of their local politicians out for lunch and whispered in the ear to not let that go through. And sure enough, the politicians were like, we're not going to let that go through. And so I think SoftBank and Nvidia and ARM realized that they're going to be swimming upstream for a very long time to try and make that go down, because countries don't want their semiconductor players being acquired. In this case, ARM is in the UK. Nvidia, I believe, is the US. UK doesn't want ARM to be acquired by a US company. No doubt about that. It's become a very hot geopolitical issue with semiconductor companies. It's just way too much friction at the moment, and indeed it probably makes more sense to do an IPO. So, second big topic is that Facebook announces that Peter Thiel, one of Facebook's first investors and longest serving directors, an incredibly close mentor to Mark Zuckerberg, probably more than anybody, honestly, will step down from Facebook's board this year. That's quite significant. The tech billionaire, who has been on the board of the company formerly known as Facebook since 2005, like when it started, because he wrote the first legit big check for Facebook, and which, by the way, was in the movie The Social Network. There was a character who played Peter Thiel's character in the movie where they went and met Peter, and Peter invested in it. Anyway. He's backing numerous politicians in the midterm elections. And now you know why. Because Peter Thiel, who's a really interesting figure in the tech landscape of things, in Silicon Valley specifically, is getting very political. In fact, he was on Trump's advisory board, if you remember correctly, and he was, when all of Silicon Valley was sort of laughing at the idea of Donald Trump running for president, Peter Thiel was the one saying, yeah, and I'm in his corner. And he was very contrarian. He was a natural contrarian, and that was one of the highlights of his contrarian resume, was backing Trump from early on in that presidential race, when everyone else thought that was ludicrous. And anywho, does anyone have but the fact that he's getting more and more political, by the way, and his investments, if you watch them very, very closely, and you should, because Peter's an amazing investor. He's a very clever individual. A lot of his investments dance around politics in interesting ways, like defense and AIs for defense and kind of supercomputer stuff, all kinds of really facial recognition type stuff and DNA testing type stuff, and really, really, really interesting stuff that, maybe no surprise what I'm about to say next, just to highlight just how brilliant this dude is, that if you know how politics works and you know how tech works, and when you're one of the few people who can stand firmly with one foot in each camp, oh boy, can you make a lot of hay really quickly and make a lot of money by influencing the politicians to adopt your interesting tech and play kind of the matchmaker, kingmaker between those two domains. There, you're as the investor, it's kind of self-serving, but it's not really necessarily illegal. It's what Nancy Pelosi wishes she could do, but she can't because she's a politician. She would get busted for it. Well, Peter's not a politician, nor does he want to be, but he does want to be connected to Trump, which he was. He does want to be connected to, and by the way, there's a really interesting story that the I don't think the public is privy to, which was a dinner that Peter arranged for Trump and Mark Zuckerberg. Do people know about that dinner? Where there was kind of a quid pro quo agreement made. I don't know. I have to be careful of speaking. I don't want to reveal something that's. I have to do my homework and find out what people already know or don't know about that dinner. I will do that, and then I'll share that story at a later date. But yeah, Peter set up a dinner with Zuck and Trump, and some really interesting quid pro quo was arranged at that dinner, just as an example of what Peter can do for the companies he invests in, and he knows what to invest in because he knows what the FBI and the DoD really, really, really want, and so he can go out and invest in those companies before anyone else is privy to what's going on. So there you go. Dr. Donish, you had your hand up, and I think Nicholas might want to jump in afterwards. Go ahead, Don. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you as well. I was going to say, what's fascinating about this is what it signals possibly for Mark Zuckerberg. For people that don't know, Peter Thiel, over the course of Facebook, especially in the early days, did some incredibly bold things as an investor that were very founder friendly. And again, people can have their opinions about Peter Thiel, but he is definitely a very founder friendly investor.
Yeah.
And this, so a good example of that is, before Peter Thiel, it was very unusual for a VC to recommend to a founder that the founder have multiple classes of shares, which again was something that people really did not even talk about until Facebook did that. And what I mean by that, I mean, people should know what that means, but if they don't, just really quickly, there was a different class of shares for Mark Zuckerberg and the early employees and for future investors, and a VC who, by the way, was against their, most VCs would say, I would never do that to myself, to have less voting rights than the future, than if I continue to invest in future rounds, did that because he believed that Mark was the right guy for the job. And he really believed in the vision, was a very supportive, founder-friendly investor, and has actually built an entire fund and future off of it. But I was going to say that what's really interesting is what this means for Mark Zuckerberg's future, in my opinion at least, at Meta. And, I wonder if he was, if that's the last straw, and perhaps, now that it's a much more corporate board, maybe less friendly board now that Peter Thiel's gone, I wonder what this signals for the leadership and whether there's going to be a shakeup of, as people know, the stock is not doing great. The metaverse play has yet to realize itself. I think it's perhaps an overreaction to the tech drop that we've seen, and Apple more than the metaverse, but and Apple's moves more than the metaverse. But generally, Tyler, I wonder if this is step one of a slow transition away from Mark Zuckerberg being the CEO of Meta. I wonder. I mean, I would love your thoughts on it since you're so close to the situation.
Danish, could you just elaborate a bit more? Is it 5 times that his shares are 5 times voting rights, or
10 times?
10 times.
Okay.
Yeah. So Tyler, I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but I wonder if this is more of a signal about a changing of the guards at Facebook or Meta.
Well, let's read just a touch of the New York Times article. A lot of people covering this. Guardian's covering it. Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Bloomberg, CNET. I mean, it's a big to-do. Even my buddy Jason has a take on Twitter saying Peter Thiel will be deeply involved in or part of the next administration. A little distance from Facebook makes a lot of sense, i.e., quote, I haven't been on the board for 2 years. So he will have plausible deniability and being able to distance himself from Facebook Yeah, that's Jason's take. So anyway, the New York Times article says
Tyler?
that, go ahead, Nicholas. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say that it makes sense that Thiel would make space between himself. He is an advocate and a follower of René Girard, and he understands the scapegoat theory extremely well. He's extremely politically adroit, as we know, with his, he doesn't mean what he says, but he says what he means, or whatever it was, that fiction before the Trump was elected. So he's not serious. Whatever he did to bamboozle everyone. But he was right in assessing the temperature of the nation. I think what you need to look back to is the decision that was made back in July of 2019, where Facebook, I think it was July of 2019, where Facebook were fined $5 billion, and the FTC commissioner slammed the blanket immunity that Zuckerberg and Sandberg got. And I think you have to understand that, you know, whether you disclose your information about the dinner, it is that Thiel was running interference for the Trump administration, clearly, and that the Cambridge Analytica exploit was well known to both Brad Parscale and the team, Cambridge Analytica team, Alexander Nix, etc., and the rest of the guys, which they were found guilty of lying about. Of course, that information, that exploit, is what won Donald Trump the election, probably, as concluded by the government. And if one wanted to have an involvement in the next administration, or the run for the next administration, it is absolutely critical that the scapegoat is not anywhere near you. So it would be my assumption, knowing how smart he is, that the deal was done to grant blanket immunity and therefore absolve him of any disclosures that would be required in order to investigate the fact that it was a very clear sorting algorithm and complicated, well, simple exploit, but only able to be expedited by two people, really. And that's Mark Zuckerberg, to Jeremiah's point about the voting control, which is why Facebook is so, or Meta is so powerful, because it is controlled by one person. It is deeply centralized compared to anyone else. And he is the guru of Zuckerberg, and he is also the political mover. So, you know, the person you should always be looking for is the kingmaker, not the king. The king is in the firing line. The kingmaker is the danger.
So while we have you here, Nicholas, the IRS says there was a huge headline a week or two ago. You'll recall we talked about it here with you about ID.me and the IRS using ID.me's facial recognition, forcing everybody to do identity verification of themselves with facial recognition to get to pay their taxes, ostensibly. And that was met with a whole lot of blowback, as one might imagine. And so now the IRS is abandoning the plans of partnering with ID.me.
They cannot, you know, this is the thing that I've been at pains to state, but it seems only to be coming into sharper focus as we move closer to the singularity, which is the metaverse and is all of these technologies. So we are going to unify our consciousness into the digital world, right? We have a mirror consciousness that is mapped using technology into our real world. And so, as I've been agitating for many years, we need a digital declaration of independence because we live in the online world. We now inhabit that world. You can't really do anything without that world. And as such, the lag is between government and regulators and the technologies. And so whilst they want to achieve certain things, like being able to ID everyone so that they can pay their taxes, and they have been developing an API for reporting purposes, which is in beta. I think it may have been released, but it was in beta when I looked at it. but their whole, the whole essence of this singularity affects all of our democracy, and it affects our democracy because America stands on its ability to collect worldwide tax. And you need perfect information to do that, and you are terrified of not only the dollar losing its global power, which of course it is going to lose its power to the digital yuan, which is where the currency wars are taking place, but not only that, is that you will have the agitation of civil rights and people who are knowledgeable about the law who will come to realize that you cannot have central repositories of this information. It infringes the Fourth Amendment, and furthermore, if you are publishing free speech, open source software, people will be empowered, if they can do this easily, to do it for themselves. And I think this is what we're rolling into, is that people want to have certain technologies and then they realize it infringes on our basic freedoms. And this is where we need to stand up and say, these are our rights. You cannot do that, because what you're seeing with something like Thiel is how easily the invisible hand, as Adam Smith said, will control the political class. Just look at Thiel's ability with Zuckerberg to control the outcome for the entire world. You're talking about three people, basically: Thiel, Zuckerberg, and Trump. That changes our reality. It was a 4% swing that was using the process of social media to demotivate people on the left who were swing voters like the Bernie Bros, and to motivate those who were inclined to fall the other way. And that's a superpower. And it's held by Mark Zuckerberg, influenced by his kingmaker. This is not the way our world should be working in the 21st century. So, these are our choices. I know I've been boring about saying it, but these are our choices: democracy and decentralization, or this tyranny of technocrats, basically.
Thanks. Ken wanted to say
yeah, Tyler, I just wanted a couple of points on this story. One is when the IRS just relented recently, they did it, largely for two reasons. They had bipartisan opposition to it. On the Republican side, it was a privacy issue, not so much a Fourth Amendment issue. I'll touch about that in a second. They were mostly concerned that a private company was going to have your data. Okay, and also it only was something that people would be facing to use this thing if you had certain interactions, whether it was paying taxes or some other thing. There was some other things. It may not have even been paying taxes. It may have been like looking for refunds. Certain interactions with the IRS that you did on their website. Okay, if you didn't use their website, like if you just filed your taxes with TurboTax, you didn't have to use this ID me. So I just want to, okay. Then on the Democratic side, Ron Wyden, who chairs the Senate Finance Committee, which is the committee that writes the tax laws, he objected to it because he believed that facial technology, and we've had this debate here before, doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. This was his position, and he chairs the Finance Committee. He objected to it because he believes that facial recognition technology discriminates against minorities, particularly African Americans, in identification. So he was against it. But on the Fourth Amendment issue, if Nicholas is right, I have to think that one through. This company, ID.me, this technology is used by many states now since the pandemic to prevent unemployment fraud. So they've required it. And if it was a Fourth Amendment violation to use this technology, at some point, some lawyer, the American Civil Liberties Union or somebody, is going to figure that out, and they're going to sue. And that hasn't happened yet. So I'm not exactly sure. It's a Fourth Amendment issue, because the Fourth Amendment is more about searches and seizures as opposed to having to prove who you are to get a government benefit. But anyway, I'll just leave it there.
so. The next. Oh, actually, Matt, you wanted to jump in Twitter Space. Go ahead.
Just real briefly, I think that history is a pretty good indicator. It's, as Nicholas points out, it has much more grave impacts to the decisions that politically, drive the U.S. and the world. But I think, isn't this, as you start to alter board members, heads of companies, isn't this kind of like history repeating itself with Google and the Byrne brothers and moving, Eric Schmidt, who at the time that was sort of the mild-mannered, looking mature person in the room. It's different but similar in terms of changing the face and the power of Facebook. In that case, Google.
Mm-hmm. So the next one from the Wall Street Journal: Peloton CEO and co-founder will step down. Okay, and we just heard that there's now a buyout. I forget, it was yesterday which two very big companies were thinking about buying it. It was
Nike.
Nike was one of them, yeah.
Amazon.
And
Amazon.
Yeah, interesting. And now today we find out the CEO co-founder stepping down. The next is from the New York Times, that the IRS, going back, we were just talking about the IRS in the last story, that the IRS says it will transition away from using facial recognition. Well, we already covered this story. What the hell is going on here? Oh, I jumped ahead to this one because Nicholas was on stage, and this is really his area. The IRS says it will transition away from using facial recognition for identity verification after a bipartisan backlash regarding its use of ID.me services. And boy, is that getting a lot of coverage from a lot of big outlets. Next is from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who is the resident, geek. The guy who was surprised about the terms and conditions of getting a discount and a rebate on the iPhone. You'll all remember that lovely article. So Mark Gurman covers tech at Bloomberg. He says he has sources that Apple's acquiring a London-based AI music, which uses AI and royalty-free music to create dynamic soundtracks that change based on user interactions and moods. Ooh, which one? There's a couple. Which one? It's called AI Music. Is that the name of it? Yes, it's called AI Music. So this is really interesting. Apple acquiring an AI startup that specializes in music creation, and it's making... There's a few apps that do this. There's a one that I use, and they're incredibly cool. You tell it what mood you're in, it will create music for you in that mood. So if you want to focus, and by the way, Apple itself has this whole new kind of focus categories in the new version of the operating system, where you say you're in, kind of chill out, go to sleep mode, you're in work mode, you're in wake up mode or gym mode or whatever. Why not have a soundtrack to go along with it that they don't have to pay any licensing for? Oh my God, would Apple love to offer that to you.
And you can monitor your heart rate as you go, and they can nudge you into all states of bliss and keep you sane.
I know that.
It's amazing as we career towards this. Doesn't this frighten you?
Well, yeah, I've been at some Spotify hackathons where that specific use case is mentioned, where they want to have, and by the way, Apple does have access to your heart rate through the watch, and they could adjust the music.
This is the singularity, right? They can see your heart rate, they can look at your time of day, they know it's time to transition you into exercise mode and play the soundtrack. I mean, it's crazy.
You could also track the cadence of a runner and match the beat to the run dynamically in real time. Or if you see what I'm saying. And they could say, do you want to speed up your run a little bit here? That we're going to slightly increase the tempo of the music. No, there's no playlist on Spotify that you can do that with. And they would have to introduce a new song. You'd be stuck on one tempo for one song, and then go to the next song, which might have a slightly faster tempo. In this case, because the music's generated dynamically, with an AI, they can, in real time, increase and decrease the tempo to match either your heart rate or your cadence of your running or whatever.
Okay, Tyler, I see the good and the bad of that. I mean, I do intervals.
The second part of the self-sovereign conscious agent theorem, and that is the conscious agent piece of it. So not only when you have identity and you have a digital declaration of independence, do you want to be self-sovereign, but you also need to make sure that you're a conscious agent, that you know that this is happening to you and that you are not being turned from Homo sapiens into Homo proteus, which is the augmented human, that is outsourcing their conscious agency, their ability to determine what is, entering their perception field and who is controlling their perceptions, because perceptions control behaviors. So the more we outsource our conscious agency and we, don't control we don't understand the information that we're receiving with our eyes and our ears and our smell and touch and taste, etc., then this is where we're being changed as a civilization. And this is where I think lovers of democracy and lovers of people power need to be extremely aware.
Jennifer, you were saying? Jennifer.
Sorry, I agree. I agree in concept with what Nicholas is saying, that people just need to be aware, but we need to be aware of kind of everything that manipulates us, from social media to these things. But as a use case, I would love music that changes. We do workouts and you have to do intervals, and it's really hard to create those tracks. I would love it to just automatically do it, because it makes, I think people know that music has a huge impact on your mood, your energy, everything else. So I think it's a great use case.
Tyler, I have a opposing idea. I don't want my mood to match with my music. For example, what if I'm feeling low or upset at something? And at that time, I want to change my mood by listening to maybe a faster beat, perhaps, to take me out of that zone where I'm at, So I don't want to match my mood all the time with the music. Sometimes I want opposing or perhaps completely different to arrive to a different mindset. I may require a completely different type of music. So that's where the choice comes along, when we choose something that is totally opposite to what we are actually experiencing. But
Yeah,
this
Aaron,
kind
they
of
give you that choice. They give you the choice. They give you that, are you in focus, work, upbeat, whatever. They give you a choice. Tyler's talking about a separate use case, which is tracking to your heart rate. I think if I choose I want upbeat music, they're not going to tap into my heart rate and go, oh, but you sound down. Let's do something down. Do you think?
well, what I was coming to in conclusion, if the dynamic means is changing in real time, matching with your kind of whatever data point they are collecting, your heart rate, whatever they are collecting in terms of determining how you're feeling, and matching it with dynamically in present time with that sensation or that experience. So that matching is taking place slowly. You are not realizing that the music is adapting to you after a while, because that level of consciousness is lost. We have all experienced when you listen to a music, sometimes it transports you to a zone. And if you're not even realizing, the dynamic music is slowly changing the way you're feeling in real time, that may lose the sense of choice.
Okay, we're ready for the next one. It says from the BBC that the UK's online safety bill will mandate porn websites verify users' age or face fines. Similar proposals were quietly dropped in 2019 after criticism, but porn websites in the UK will be legally required to verify the age of their users under the new internet safety laws. And how will they go about doing that, Nicholas? How are they going to...
Yeah. I missed the word. Did you say for porn users?
Yes, they're going to be required to have age identification. But how do you legitimately do age identification? Age verification.
Right. So really, this is exactly the first mover use case is always the vices in inverted commas, or the fringes of society. So it was naturally going to be the adult industry that would be the first. And the reason why is also they have the biggest incentive, because they are underbanked by credit card companies. And the reason why is that there's usually some form of buyer's remorse when someone is using and paying for a pornography service. And when I say buyer's remorse, they then act and charge back in order to get the money back that they spent whilst in rapture. So this issue gives reason to financial intermediaries to not want to engage with them, and to make their payments processing very expensive, which is what OnlyFans found out when they were deplatformed by their bank. And then what occurred from there was that OnlyFans, because they were making so much money from this business, were then found another banking partner, but they still charged the creators anything between 20 and with the payments processing 30%. So there is a giant economic incentive and there is a multi-billion-dollar business that is fulfilling the needs of many millions of people. So the way that I couch identity and adult is that this is really about taking responsibility that people under the age of 18 who are not adults should not gain access to those sites. And so the solution for pornography and for the users, so users want privacy in that marketplace, and creators want payments surety, and they don't want to be deplatformed because this is a source of their income. And the answer is zero knowledge proofs with an attestation framework and the use of token economics or coinomics if you're doing a truly decentralized platform, which will enable creators to take 90+% of the take rate and to not have to worry about being censored, so they get censorship resistance. But society needs to make sure that they are using zero knowledge proofs. The users will want zero knowledge proofs, whereby they can provide due diligence and KYC information that is private but provable, and therefore all of these companies can be in compliance with their regional legal jurisdictions.
Okay, Dr. Donish just sent me an update on the previous story about Peloton CEO leaving. As part of that story, they did say they're going to lay off a bunch of people, and then Donish found an interesting update that someone named Lauren Thomas, she tweets out that she's been receiving many messages from now former Peloton employees who learned that they were being let go because Peloton turned off their access to Slack, which is how everyone communicates as an employee. And if your Slack account is down, well, you can't really function as an employee. And that's how they're finding out they're no longer Peloton employees. And indeed, they're letting go lots and lots of people. And that's maybe they should have thought that through a little more carefully about the order sequence of events as to how you lay off people. You don't turn off their Slack account before you kind of notify them. So thank you for that update, Donish. That's funny. The next is that Tinder says it will no longer charge older users more for Tinder Plus after a report showed that Tinder users that were over the age of 30, from 30 to 49, were being charged on average 65% more in multiple markets. Tinder says it will now no longer charge older users more than, so no more age discrimination, essentially, for the pricing. That's great. And I think there might have been a legal issue there, perhaps. Are you allowed to charge a different amount based on age of a product? That's an interesting. I imagine you can't discriminate on age on the price of a product. I imagine Ken might be the one with that tidbit in his back pocket. Ken, any idea on that one? It must be. I can't think of why else they would stop doing it. It was incredibly lucrative, right?
What was the question? I was just listening to the story. It had something to do with Tinder and age discrimination. You're asking me?
Yeah. Tinder says it's no longer going to charge older users more for Tinder Plus. They were charging people over 30 more for Tinder Plus than for people under 30, which I imagine there might be laws against that.
Usually the only age. I mean, this is probably better with a lawyer for this. I just always want to remind people. Sometimes people think I'm a lawyer. I'm not. But no. So the age discrimination laws are generally about employment. Wow, I've never seen a price discrimination case based on age.
Right.
I mean, I don't even know one. So
Insurance, you discriminate on
But
age
Tyler,
by definition.
that's right. Yeah.
but
That's a
Tyler,
great point. Yeah, medical insurance, of course they do. Yes, Cheryl. Yeah.
Tyler, when you go to a theme park like Disneyland, the adult and the children are charged differently, right?
Yeah, on adults and children they do. Sure. Okay. Fair
Even
enough.
when they do senior
Sometimes.
discount,
I'm
uh,
willing to bet
still.
every penny we all have that they were charging the guys more than the ladies as well on the Tinder
At
as well.
on they
Well, by the way, in
yep.
certain cases that's legal. Like in Nevada, we have a specific law that allows like the nightclubs to charge men more. I mean, literally. Because that's just the way it is. The women generally get in free, and the men have to pay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
legal.
case in Japan as well. Ladies usually pay less or no need to pay, but guys have to pay more. And it also depends on which day of the week.
So it's a day of the week discrimination. So the next one is
Only on days ending in Y.
it's facing the EU details the CHIPS Act, a plan to make 43 billion euros in funding available for chip production, seeking to compete with the US and Asia. Yes, of course they are, as for reasons we discussed about an hour ago. That it's why the UK didn't want ARM to be sold to Nvidia. This is becoming a geopolitical dynamite issue. Is these chip manufacturing and EU? I mean, it's almost what happened was for those who were who fell asleep during class during COVID. Basically, during COVID, everyone got locked down. There was a virus. And there was a pandemic, and everyone got stuck at home and started buying gadgets like crazy because they were bored on their sofas. That was in some part led to this huge chip boom. And then countries started realizing we need to control our own chips because the consumer good manufacturers couldn't get access to the chips. And now everyone's trying to onshore chip manufacturing in very big ways. And now the EU has the CHIPS Act to set aside 43 billion euros for funding for chip production. Of course, they're going to do that. Everywhere around the planet wants to onshore all the chip production. It's a geopolitical issue now. So the next is from the New York Times, that as data centers grow, again because of the pandemic and everyone on their gadgets, engineers at Facebook and Google and other companies worry about the reliability of ever smaller chips and hardware failures with unclear causes. As the largest computer networks continue to grow, some engineers fear that their smallest components could prove to be an Achilles heel. Yeah, because they generally don't control those. Facebook are dependent on those chips. Google, also Apple, not so much. Apple's starting to get control of their chips. And if you want to build something, everyone's building on someone else's platform. And at the end of the day, people build their influencer careers on Instagram, which are built on top of AWS, which are built on top of AMD chips at the end of the day. And so everyone's building on top of everyone else's platform. Facebook doesn't, and everyone's trying to control the platform that they're built on top of. So this is why you have Facebook and Google trying to figure out how to become less dependent on other companies' chips. And Apple's making their own chips now. Google's starting to make their own chips. And you might even see Facebook start to dabble in that space as well. Yeah, big computer companies are becoming aware of their vulnerability of building on these things. And it is a big headache, as the New York Times article says.
I think the right way to say is they design their own chips. They still need to outsource it to a foundry to make their chips.
Mm-hmm. And
so they all become their own design house instead of another company doing it.
Yeah, Cheryl worked at a chip company, by the way. So the next one is several crypto companies, including Coinbase and BitMEX, launch a coalition to, quote, maintain fair and orderly digital asset markets and prevent market abuse. This could be very interesting. My buddy Kurt in Twitter might have a thought on this as well. So welcome, Kurt. And Clinton has got his hand up over there in Twitter, and we've got 333 people in Clubhouse who might want to jump in on this one. But that sounds to me like the beginnings of Coinbase wanting to build a coalition to protect their interests, for fear that there's going to be this growing tension between the government and the crypto communities and how this all plays out. And we obviously been feeling this friction developing on kind of multiple dimensions for a while now. But indeed, they're going to form a coalition and do what people do and try and put all of their eggs together and put all their hands together and lift all in one direction and try and move, because they're all essentially in the same camp at the end of the day, a lot of them, although the whole crypto campus itself bifurcated into kind of two camps, which is the truly decentralized and then the corporate backed, as Nicholas is fond of reminding us regularly. But Coinbase and BitMEX launch a coalition to, quote, maintain fair and orderly digital asset markets and prevent market abuse. Right. Well,
I think you've got to couch this in terms of the latest SEC guidance. And so the exchanges, those guys are already basically regulated under the US jurisdiction, and they are fully KYC AML, and they are creating obviously a lobbying group to advocate for their own interests, because they're worth, $50 billion, in Coinbase case, or originally 100, and that they want to maintain that they should be the on-ramps for the US consumers. It seems entirely natural. I think what the decentralized world, the DEXs of the world, it's all going to come down to how truly decentralized you are, because we've seen it very clearly with, for example, I think it was Hayden, who was deplatformed by JP Morgan because of his DeFi exposure. It's going to be the DEXs and the truly decentralized that are going to need to, demonstrate to the government that there's nothing that they can do, just like Bitcoin demonstrated, which led to this, what we call regulatory bear hug, which is exactly what they did with the VCs, is bring these guys in and let's put enough volume through these markets that they become the choke point that keeps the invisible hand working.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Who was it? Also, Clinton, you've got your hand up in the Twitter space. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Appreciate that. Just a couple of things that sort of, so the previous, I'd like to talk to both points. So the previous point about onshoring chip manufacturing, the thing I find most fascinating about that is that what we have seen, and when I say we, I mean all of us on this space and everyone in the world, is that over the last 3 years that we have witnessed the COVID pandemic, there has been a real breakaway from the 1990s thinking that everything should be offshore. So like whether we're talking about computer chips like your previous article, or PPE, medical wear or equipment or what have you, there seems to have been almost a paradigm shift within much of Europe, North America, that offshoring may not have been a particularly good idea, even if the margins were better and it would potentially give you more profit. So that's sort of the first thing I just had wanted to respond to. In regards to the cryptocurrency thing, one of my problems with the Bitcoin and with cryptocurrency in general is that the planet's population is 8 billion people. And the maximum number of Bitcoin that can go into circulation is 21 million Bitcoin. And so the idea that many of, not gold bugs, but I guess I'll call them Bitcoin bugs, this idea that, we're getting behind a completely 100% decentralized monetary system that has zero influence from outside forces, I think, quite frankly, is a little bit of a pipe dream, because you have 8 billion people and 21 million Bitcoins. And it's also important to remember that a significant portion of the 21 million Bitcoins is currently held by a handful of individuals. So, I think there's a debate as to, is this an investment tool or is it a currency? And I don't believe that Bitcoin can act as a legitimate global currency because
I think
that's
go
pretty
ahead.
standard, honestly. That's a pretty.
We're not going to go into that room. There's 10 rooms going on in Clubhouse and 50 rooms in Twitter Spaces currently on exactly that conversation. So we will dodge that bullet.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Tyler, is it okay just to make a 10, 15-second interjection, though? Just
10
important fact correction. There are 21 million total, but you can buy a 100 million for the Bitcoin. So it's something called unit bias to assume that you need to be buying a whole Bitcoin. You're very welcome to go and buy up to a very, very small proportion of one. Just an important fact.
Divisible, yeah. Okay. So the next big topic.
Can I say something about the Bitcoin thing or not? I mean, I don't know.
If it's shorter than what Ben just did, yes.
Oh, it's just. I mean, it's pretty clear that I'm having a little temper tantrum, baby here.
Don't say no.
It's pretty clear that it's not. You can't have something that's a currency and an asset. It has to be one or the other because they're fundamentally opposed. So it's pretty clear, for a number of people that it's actually a great asset. It's going to be very difficult to function as a currency, especially because it's so volatile, and currencies are non-volatile. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have value, and that doesn't mean that it is. I think that people take it as such an all or nothing kind of thing. It's an amazing asset, but it's just a different kind of functionality than was originally intended. But the fact that it has any functionality at all is pretty remarkable, honestly.
Gold was a currency and an asset.
The baby didn't want to hear about Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's all right. So, by the way, a related article, and we'll leave it at this, is the Cash App by Mr. Jack Dorsey, part of Square, now called Block. Anyway, the Cash App is now adding the Lightning Network to ostensibly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ben or Nicholas, because Jack seems to have high hopes that Bitcoin will be used as more of a currency. Cash App adopts Lightning Network for free Bitcoin transactions.
He's making a wise decision because he is the Bitcoin messiah from the fiat world. He has the tools, to become a meme. He's a meme lord at the moment, not a meme king, especially now he doesn't have Twitter control. But he has all the pieces that enable him to introduce Lightning Network. We could have arguments about whether the Lightning Network is the right security approach, but let's not get into that detail. He's making a smart move. He's playing the game, and he will do everything to comply with the regulations, including identity and KYC AML, that his company will own. It will not be self-sovereign.
Okay, next up is Tick-Tock. Updates its policies to improve safety for LGBTQ users, including banning misgendering, adds tools for age-appropriate content, and more. Months after Tick-Tock was hauled into its first ever major congressional hearing over platform safety, the company is today announcing a series of policy updates and plans for new features and technologies aiming at making the video-based social network a safer and more secure environment, particularly for young users. The changes attempt to address some concerns raised by U.S. senators during their inquiries into TikTok's business practices, including the prevalence of eating disorder content and dangerous hoaxes on the app, which are particularly harmful to teens and young adults. In addition, TikTok is laying out a roadmap for addressing other serious issues around hateful ideologies with regard to LGBTQ and minor safety, and the latter which will involve having creators designate the age appropriateness of their content, as YouTube sort of does, as it says, is this content appropriate for children, for example. TikTok also said it's expanding its policy to protect the, quote, security, integrity, availability, and reliability of its platform. The change follows recent news that the Biden administration is weighing new rules for Chinese apps to protect user data from being exploited by foreign adversaries. The company said it will open cyber incident monitoring and investigative response centers in Washington, D.C., Dublin, and Singapore this year as part of this expanded effort to better prohibit unauthorized access to TikTok content accounts, systems, and data.
Tyler, did they say that they're going to have the people posting determine the age appropriateness for their content?
Yes.
And also, are they going to have what was that the only thing they're having them determine, or is TikTok implementing the other policies and procedures?
That's all we were able to gather from that article.
Yeah, because that would be an interesting one if they're putting it on them, obviously for a lot of reasons. But one would be, reduce TikTok's moderation and try to maintain their Section 230 shield. But that sounds absurd.
Especially if the most egregious content is not coming from genuine users. It's a wild theory that there could be non-genuine users on TikTok. For example, Facebook routinely moves tens of thousands of Chinese accounts who are trying to cause misinformation in America. So I wonder, is TikTok, a Chinese app invested in with board members from the CCP, are also going to be removing tens of thousands of Chinese accounts?
Isn't it well known?
Yeah, well,
no, I just wanted to add quickly that isn't it well known that not Bitcoin, sorry, the Chinese government has a lot of YouTube channels that they fund basically from people all around the world. So them using their own app to do such a thing isn't such of a
issue. But
stretch.
the point is TikTok can have policies for its authentic users to do whatever they want. That's not going to stop how TikTok is assumed to be weaponized internally.
I agree with you, Tyler, because we discussed earlier how there were several accounts promoting those unsafe trends on TikTok, and those accounts were not related to any sovereign identity of a human. Who knows who are the real culprits behind such trends? So, what is TikTok going to do, or are they even willing to take any actions against such accounts?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think I'm sorry. Just one last thing, just to put a little bit more of a lens on one point of differentiation. I think that you're describing vis-a-vis TikTok and Facebook and Instagram was that they are going to at least put up some level of it's not really a rating or a self rating with regards to children. So that is one kind of leg on the stool kind of feature that all the social platforms need to put on there. It's great that you put that YouTube does that, right? So that's something that the Facebook app should be doing as well. But all the other points you're bringing out with regards to cleaning up the bots and stuff like that is something that Facebook does do. They definitely make announcements and make progress on that.
Can we ping? Is Dr. Donish still with us? Donish, is he still there? He was here. He was making contributions an hour ago. His company is Reliance Health, is it not?
Resilient.
Resilient. Thank you. Okay, I just saw a company called Reliance Health that just raised money. Thank you. What else do we got? Well, we're going to go into the tweets because we went through the top tech stories. Well done, everybody. Now we get to go into.
Hey, Tyler, because you asked me about the what was the dating app? Which one was it now?
Tinder. If they can
Tinder, Tinder, right? Yeah, okay. So I looked at the story on that. So the specific answer to your question, by the way, is number one. They were doing this in multiple countries, so multiple countries' laws would have applied. But there was a lawsuit brought under California law under two laws. One of them is the UNRWA Act, named after Jesse Unruh, who used to be the Speaker of the Assembly many decades ago. And it's basically a civil rights act. It doesn't look that different than federal civil rights act. It doesn't actually even mention age, by the way, that act. But the California Supreme Court has ruled that that act will not necessarily be restricted to the categories that it lists. So I am always wondering, by the way, with like auto insurance, how they get away with that, if that's, if they're going to apply it to age. But more importantly, the reason I interjected and interrupted you here again, there was a second California law, which is really important for tech investors, that they also sued under. And by the way, it was a settlement, so we don't actually know. They were never held in violation of either of these laws. But the second California law was the anti-competition law, which was the law that was cited in the Epic Games case with Apple and the apps. Okay, so those were the two laws that they got sued under California law. And again, it was essentially, I mean, either they settled or they voluntarily did this. They're changing it. So I don't think the courts in California have actually ruled whether or not they violated either one of those laws. But I thought it was interesting that one of the laws that the plaintiff sued under in California was the same law that Epic Games was using against Apple.
Okay, so the next, the first
Tyler, another point, sorry.
about what?
A couple of days ago, you read the news about Biden administration and their view of developing some sort of regulatory body that regulates social media and the content that's coming in. I was just thinking whether this response of TikTok is based on such regulatory initiative that are coming in future. So they're already trying to.
Yeah, it was because they appeared before a Senate hearing about how their app, and they were asked hard questions about kids' safety on their app and everything else. And I think they're trying to appear to be proactive in addressing these things, and that's what the article implies. I believe as the journalist does on that front. So there's a new story in the top stories since we started. How long ago? An hour and a half ago, which is just coming out of Apple. And I'm reading this directly from Apple's site. It says Apple empowers businesses to accept contactless payments through tap to pay on iPhone. Later this year, U.S. merchants, that's pretty much anybody, by the way, will be able to accept Apple Pay and other contactless payments simply by using an iPhone and a partner-enabled iOS app. So that means they're getting into competition with Square, essentially. And there's photos of this, and it looks, as you might assume, very simple, and I dare say even elegant. As usual, tap to pay for iPhone. Apple today announced plans to introduce the new capability will empower millions of merchants across the U.S., from small businesses to large retailers, to use their iPhone to seamlessly and securely accept Apple Pay. Like they do in their own stores for the past, 8 years. Contactless.
And you'll remember that Apple has got the permission to do the driving license identity approvals. So
that's right.
And they know everything else about you anyway. So Apple is, you have to pray that the leader of Apple, remains healthy, and this is where the future is going.
It's an interesting.
Yeah, but also, Tyler, did you say it's a partner-enabled app? So who are they relying on?
Well, they're going to allow. They're not going to force the payer to use one particular app. The payer will be able to use any app, and the merchant will have the Apple app, which is kind of like the Square style app. And they don't want to force. They want users to be able to use whatever app they want to use to pay for things. They don't want, but those apps will have to partner with Apple just to plug in an API, basically, to enable it.
And the partner is Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, and there's a lot of banks.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, Nicholas. Who's behind? Yeah, who's enabling the payments, and also
their partner on Apple Pay, the credit card, is Goldman.
Right. Yeah, I want to see who else is covering this other than Apple. A lot already. Oh, Stripe. The Verge. Apple's tap to pay feature lets newer iPhones accept contactless payments. Apple announces tap to pay feature that will allow iPhones to accept it. Yeah, everyone's got the same headline. I think it'll take a little while more for. Oh, here's Benedict Evans, who's a rather intelligent geek. He says Apple unveils contactless payments via tap to pay on iPhone already possible on Android, of course, and the EU is putting pressure on Apple to open up NFC further. And let's see who else has a good take on this. Stripe is partnering with Apple to enable tap to pay on iPhone. Already, they're kind of announcing it simultaneously. Mark Gurman at Bloomberg says it's Apple's Square killer is now official. And I think, well...
So now it makes sense, right? So if you understand that the payments use case, which, many advocate Bitcoin, for example, and I sort of agree in some ways with what Carlton said, but in some areas, but what the payments use case for ease and simplicity and cost to user has been eradicated, even from the bank's business. So all of those people who are really watching are realizing that the lending business is the business to be in if you're in fintech or if you're in the decentralized finance world. That's, I think, the message you should take away from that, because it's now almost impossible for anyone else to compete there.
It's also, Nicholas, I would ask, is it also, they're going to have a whole, I don't know if this adds like a meaningful leg, but a leg into your economic data, your economic behaviors that both Goldman and Apple are going to have. Would be interesting to know what rights and liabilities they each have there and how far that goes.
They have all that data anyway, and the guys use that data all the time. That's the backbone of their industry from a lending perspective.
Right, but this is just another leg into it, right? Or actually, I guess if you do anything on their app, they already knew about it. All right.
They know everything. That's why you have to worry about being self-sovereign on the data so that you can resell that data to whoever you like. That's why Epic Games and Fortnite and all of those guys are having a battle with Apple, because you will pay the Apple tax because that's their model. It's their world. It's not your world. It's their world. And they give you great service, and it's super elegant, and it's really hard to resist. It's, the opiate of the rich.
Oh, by the way, I'm now looking at a photo of this tap to pay on iPhone. It will also allow merchants to accept payments from anyone who has a NFC chipped credit card. So just like pretty much any merchant terminal out there today, all of those payment terminals this is quite a blow to them, I have to imagine, because now anyone can pay with any modern credit card. You just tap the credit card onto the merchant's iPhone and you're good to go. Okay.
Yep.
So the next tweet is from Jeff G. from the New York Times. That it says, a sense of crisis as wasabi, a pungent staple of Japanese cuisine, and anyone who's ever eaten sushi knows what wasabi is. Climate and demographic threats are chipping away at a centuries-old culture surrounding the cultivation of wasabi. Wasabi's going to become an extinct vegetable. We're in addition to extinct animals, we're now going to have climate extinct vegetables, and wasabi's kind of the dodo of the vegetable kingdom.
They can't grow horseradish anymore.
Well, the New York Times is reporting that wasabi is under threat by climate change.
And somebody just replied to that tweet, and they said that all wasabi is fake.
No, the one you have in US is probably fake, but the one I have in Japan is probably real.
Oh,
the article also mentioned in Japan was fake. You guys,
those that you buy like 100 yen is fake, but those real ones that you have to oroshi before you eat, those are actually not that pungent, by the way, Tyler.
Yeah. So
the fake ones are pungent.
What Cheryl's referring to is what people who have lived in Tokyo, like we have, know very well, which is there's all kinds of variations of what's called colloquially wasabi. Some of them are basically wasabi flavored toothpaste. Some, the real plant, where when you go to some of the higher end sushi restaurants, the chef will actually grate the wasabi onto your sushi plate for you to reassure you that this is actual legitimate wasabi root that he's putting on your plate for you to add to your sushi. So most of the time, Cheryl's right. A lot of what people think they are consuming as wasabi is barely wasabi by anybody's definition. So, the next article, shall we, is from a startup out of India, another unicorn, now valued at 1.5 billion, called Elastic Run, which helps connect businesses to little corner stores, has become India's latest unicorn after raising $300 million from, you guessed it, SoftBank. The next is back to Jeff G. from the Wall Street Journal. It says, teen girls' sexy Tick-Tock videos may take a mental health toll. Girls are often anxious and overwhelmed by the attention they get after posting suggestive videos. Therapists say more are suffering emotionally. And then it tells the story of Julia Anderson joined TikTok at age 16. Her first video featured her family's home renovations. It got 5 likes. After seeing others post risque photos and getting more likes, she tried it too. I wanted to get famous on TikTok, and I learned that if you post stuff showing your body, people will start liking it. Julia, now 18-year-old high school senior near Sacramento, said, sudden TikTok fame is catching teens off guard, leaving many girls unprepared for the attention they thought they wanted. According to parents, therapists, and teens, in some cases, predators target girls who make sexually suggestive videos. Less dangerous interactions can also harm girls' self-esteem and leave them feeling exploited, they say. Mental health professionals around the country are growing increasingly concerned about the effects on teen girls of posting sexualized TikTok videos. Therapists say teens who lack a group of close friends and teens with underlying mental health issues, especially teen girls who struggle with disordered eating and body image issues, are at particular risk. Quote, for a young girl who's developing her identity, to be swept up into a sexual world like that is hugely destructive, says Paul Sunseri, a psychologist and director at New Horizon Child and Family Institute in El Dorado Hills, California, where Julia began receiving treatment last year for anxiety and depression. Quote, when teen girls are rewarded for their sexuality, they come to believe that their value is in how they look. He said approximately a quarter of the female patients at his clinic have produced sexualized content on TikTok.
I have a 13-year-old daughter here in Los Angeles, and she has TikTok, and you can see how they are forced in by their social milieu to use TikTok, because if you're not on TikTok, or if you're not on Instagram, or if you're not on Snap, you don't have a social life, especially with the pandemic. And it is a dangerous application for young girls and boys. I think it's very, very difficult. I think they should be educating in school about good social media hygiene, especially if you look at what has happened to people who've said things online, done things online, and as in the case of an individual at ENS, they're suffering for things that they said many years ago that they now may well regret. So it's been, I think it's very, very difficult to keep them away from it. So
you know what?
I don't know if anyone's got any other solutions or ideas, but if anyone's got any ideas, I'm all ears.
I heard there's this new thing called crack cocaine, and if you smoke it, it also has negative consequences.
Yeah, but Tyler, this isn't okay. So this is the same stuff that's gone on forever. It's just amplified with apps, right? So in our new digital world, this is just amplification. Girls probably wore short shorts to school before, and were sexualized, and now you're doing it online. And as Nicholas said, it follows you forever. It's things you've done ages ago. I'd go back to the schools. I mean, this has come up in this room a lot before. We're saying it's not Instagram's fault, but here we're going to say it is TikTok's fault. They have a better algorithm. They amplify more effectively, which is detrimental. So in certain instances, as you're highlighting here, and with Nicholas, our school systems need to be overhauled. This is a digital world, and the fact that they don't teach digital hygiene, they don't teach digital security hygiene, privacy hygiene, they don't teach how to use these and what these are doing is honestly absurd. And also, I think Section 230 with this whole Joe Rogan thing, I was thinking about this. I think that the whole Joe Rogan Spotify is going to shed more light on the Section 230, even though Spotify is a publisher, because they are amplifying. You know, they've been one big thing they do there is they're amplifying, giving people platforms, which all of these platforms, Facebook, et cetera, benefit from the platform's amplification, which, you know, currently they aren't held liable for as a modification. So it'll be interesting. But I go back to Nicholas's point of schools.
I wanted to add because
But
I have to deal with the
the
school
bigger,
systems.
just
This
to,
is
just to
Al.
counter that 2
Hold
seconds,
on, Al.
but the bigger point
I
is
have
that
to.
there's so
Hold
much
on
social
1 second,
pressure
Al.
because this is where children communicate. So if you stop them from being communicating, they can't play with their friends as well because they play online. And so it's very difficult as a parent to stop them using these things. That's why it's even if you have a comprehension, I just wondered if anyone else has got any other thoughts.
Al does.
No, I
Go.
agree with you, Nicholas. That's why they need to understand it better. Or there needs to be more understanding around it. They're not going to stop using it, and there are plenty of benefits. And it's a social, you know, the social pressures, et cetera. And they do, you know, communicate online and connect online. But there needs to be more understanding by all of society, not just the kids who are doing this, but their parents and others.
Al, you were saying.
May I suggest?
Elle was going to go, and then whoever wants to go next. By the way, after Elle speaks, I'm going to let Elle mod for 2 seconds because I will be back in 4 minutes. Go ahead, Elle.
Okay. All right, so I just wanted to say because I've had to roll out stuff for public safety to monitor this stuff and also talk. We have IT Day, or used to have IT Day with the students and the kids. The problem is, even if you teach them about privacy and give them all this information, they don't understand the ramifications of what ensuring not practicing these things are because there's nothing that really there's no cause and effect immediately to them, whether it's something they post now or in the future, because their minds haven't developed that yet. Not all of them, but some of their minds just have not developed into thinking that far ahead and what the ramifications are. So no matter, just like with adults, no matter what tools you give them, no matter what information you give them, they want to share and communicate and do what they want with their friends. So it's that human social engineering thing that you have to overcome.
Right.
So,
But Elle, I
L,
would push there and say
sorry,
that that's not
Jennifer.
effective training. Again, this is going to take time. It's not a turn on one class and they'll understand it. And some areas and training, you know, school and education is better than others, but it's going to be an ongoing process. But as you point, it's social engineering that's going on rampantly.
Aaron.
So, L, I was trying to just think about the modeling behavior. What if we give our children a choice, as opposed to if they are believing that risque picture is the only way to gain follower, giving them, for example, Haley Arsenault's account, who's an astronaut, have so many followers. Greta Thunberg's account, she has many followers. And there are people like that, females like that, males like that, any gender, who have accomplished that kind of followers, those numbers, but their intentions are not to just show off their body, but to highlight their mind or their goal in life or their purpose in life. So there are many different ways to gain follower if that's the goal they're trying
But
to
why
get.
are followers important? It's an intangible thing that doesn't necessarily do anything. The
It's
point
not
is
a.
who you are. See, that's the problem in
May
itself.
I
I have
finish my
two,
point?
and I'm just telling you that I do have two sons, and we talk about social media all the time. And when I don't emphasize or I tell them about the importance of it, and I empower them in a different way and not focus on social media, that helps. It's just another
Yeah.
tool.
It works for you perfectly, but then there are kids who want to be on social media. And I'm trying to suggest that there are many different venues if you want to be on social media to highlight your attributes, your intelligence, your cooking skills, your baking, your decoration. There's so many different ways. So we are giving them modeling in a positive way that you can be on social media, and not to just focus on your body, but there's
But
so
Aaron, aren't
many
they
other
already
things
doing
that you
this?
can
There's
do.
just plenty, as you said,
If
those
I could
accounts
just,
already exist.
just chime in there,
They're
just I
working.
think that you're slightly. I think you're absolutely right. There's many good things that you can do online, but the general engagement is between the girls themselves, and
then there's videos, and it's not some, and, the hypersexualized example is the far extreme, but there's just, their life is being lived out, and they do the dances, and they talk to the camera in a way that we wouldn't, right? So, but that then it goes into the public domain essentially. And there's nothing you can do to stop that. It's not about saying that they're not observing good examples and good role models and understanding that there is, a better way. I don't think it's about sexualized content. I think it's about children who are using this and exploring their natural, conversations between boys and girls who are teenagers. And then it just is that they don't have any privacy and they don't have the ability to remove that when they have agency. So they're contributing their likeness to a platform that is generating money for a business, and they have no privacy, they have no agency, and they have no sovereignty, and it will outlast them. And it's all contributing to a data pool that is then manipulating them and then taking them down dark alleys like bad dietary habits and cutting and all these other things that go on because some people fall down rabbit holes. And so it's about saying, what are we really going to do about that? And how do we have enough agency that we can remove things from the record and we can, have a way that children are children and that they are protected from perverts and people that would seek to exploit them. That's really the societal question, I think.
Can I frame it around social?
Tyler?
I'm sorry.
This is Pat in Twitter Space.
Let's go, Pat.
Yes, Pat, go ahead.
We're going to go Pat and then David. Try and keep it under a minute, please.
Thank you, Tyler. I was just wanting to comment on the fact that, although schools may have a level of responsibility to inform and educate about digital hygiene and all the rest of it, I don't see why I, as a parent, should abdicate my own responsibility in how my child turns out. And there is such a thing as peer pressure, which has become much more evident after the whole phenomenon of teenageness has been put out there since the 50s and 60s and stuff like that. But the point being that we can only do the best that we can as human beings. And if we spend a little bit of time with our children and we are interested and involved in them, I think we can do a lot of what Elle was talking about and trying to get them to have an open discussion with you within the family and be able to talk about things, peer pressure, things that concern them. But the point of my comment today is this. Quite some years ago, somebody said to me, an older person said to me, don't underestimate your kids. They are listening. When you so-called nag your children, remind them repeatedly about things, and they ignore you because they look as if they're in another world or whatever, they are actually listening, and they do take credit. I have got two boys who are now men, and there are amazing things that this Chinese mother that snagged them for years and years that they remember, and they recognize. They have filtered through their own understanding as to what's right and what's wrong. And thank goodness they survived a level of the pressure of peers and have come out the other side fairly okay. But we still have a responsibility as parents to keep an eye on it. You might not be able to fully control it, but you have the right and the authority to keep an eye on it. Thank you. That's all. I hope it's less than a minute.
Okay, David.
I would like to frame it around social cost, and this is something that our civilization, our society, we do not do a good job of always just even having that as part of the conversation. So the social cost of nicotine and tobacco years ago, right? That we had an acknowledgement that there was a cost, and we found a way to kind of put a framework together to kind of reduce that social cost.
Hang on. You want to tax twerking?
I'm sorry.
You want to do it? You want to do a twerk tax?
Let me finish my point, okay? Because I would love to tax lots of things, Tyler, and taxes are great. If you want to go, you promote Scandinavian countries all the time. They have all kinds of taxes to manage behaviors and all these different things.
I'm with you. Let's do it.
No. Let me. I'm an old fart. If you take me off my topic, we short another cup of coffee. No, but my point is this: being somebody from games, I remember just when the interactive medium was brought to the masses, and so here we have a social game, media, right? And there is a social cost to it. Parenting is hard. Being a good parent is hard. Single parents have a challenge of even tougher time, let alone two parents that are still together trying to raise kids. So we need to model, and there's accountability issues with regards to parenting, but it's, there is also there's a social cost to a generation of young people whose brains are not fully, I won't say cooked, but they're not fully developed. We just need to acknowledge it, and I don't know all the answers. You heard me say it, but we need to acknowledge it, and we need to find ways to just cultivate these types of better use of this very. It is a media form, and it is the human behavioral psychology of these apps is not good for lots of people, and we're not doing a good enough job. So social cost is one of the things that I would just put on the table to say, hey y'all, there is a cost period, and some of us have a more challenging time than others. I had other points, but now I'm I'm off of them. Thanks, Tyler, for letting me share a few thoughts.
I don't blame you. So I propose the following. I'm going to start my own meme, for lack of a better word, and introduce a new social idea that that humans, as you said, parenting is hard. And what you mean when you said that is that single parenting is obviously hard, and having even two parents is still incredibly hard. I would argue that is a relatively incredibly recent social concept of nuclear families, have two parents, one child, two child, three children, whatever it is. That historically the human animal was raised in a more social environment with grandparents and aunts and uncles, and extended family and tribes. And I think that is actually how we are meant to be raised. And I think we are all doing ourselves an incredible disservice by assuming that we should be raising kids with just two individuals trying to raise kids, and partly because I can give 1,000 examples, but by the way, I live in a place where people are still raised by a community here in Thailand, and I see it all the time. And I can tell you that the Thai kids, compared with the Western kids who visit me at my resort, it is night and day. Holy cow! It's unbelievable difference how incredibly rotten the Western kids are, almost without exception, and how incredibly well-behaved Thai kids are, almost without exception. But one little thought that has occurred to me as I've watched this for endless hours over many years is that the Western kids engage with their parents, and nearly exclusively only their parents, and they watch their parents engage endlessly. And their parents are often squabbling with each other and with them as the children. There's a very limited number of interactions and how they behave and whatever. And the power dynamic between the child and the mother, or the child and the father, becomes this contest, and in many cases the child wins. Now, in the Southeast Asian, you could even kind of extend it to Asia more broadly, and even well beyond that, the power dynamic is totally different. It's the child versus everybody. The child doesn't get this idea that they are the boss. That thought never enters their head like it does in the Western families. And the interactions that they watch the parents have with the grandparents and the aunts and the uncles and everything else, they get to watch normal, civil, appropriate behaviors of how to behave with and around other people that they're not experiencing at home in their basement in Berlin. So keep that in mind. I'm of the idea that we should start accepting, just as we realized that there's the gut biome and the vagus nerve, and we are learning every day about what's better for humanity. I think we're going to learn and start to look back on this era of two-parent families as a ridiculous experiment that we tried to force on ourselves due to expensive housing, essentially, and inner city living and whatnot. So anyway,
I was just going to say that's the big caveat, is that the Western societies have created a trauma loop, and the breakdown of the nuclear family has essentially created an economic problem where people are living paycheck to paycheck. That means that they have to outsource a lot of their parenting duties, and that they are exhausted from being on this treadmill. I'm not excusing anyone not taking responsibility for being a good parent. And if you have the privilege of being successful and being able to be a father and a mother that are fully present, it is a great privilege for children if you are taking that level of attention. And I think it's just extremely expensive to do that in America today, in big cities,
So
maybe in different
And I agree
areas.
with you,
don't worry.
Tyler. Coming from the Asian culture, I remember learning meditation from my grandmother. My uncle taught me how to drive. I saw my father getting scolded by my grandmother in front of me almost every single day. And I learned how to respect every single one of them. My position was the last in the house. There was this hierarchy that I had to observe and follow all the rules from all these people. And that is a completely different mindset as opposed to here in Western culture, which I'm not an expert on, but I can make and draw some conclusion based on the comparative analysis between how I behave and act and respond and how my friends do when they are told no about something, or when they are told that you have to do certain things, caring about other people. And this idea of singularity and personal prioritization of individuality over a collective concept is another aspect of this mindset.
Exactly.
There are pros and cons for both, but you have a point.
So we got to
I
pause it
think
there. I know everyone wants to jump in on that topic. I'm already getting DMs saying we cover that issue too often, and we do. And that person's correct. So thank you for that DM. The next tweet that I want to get into is that a Pacific Island paradise wants you to become a crypto citizen. How will it work? This Pacific Island nation of Palau is kicking off a digital residency scheme for anyone wishing to become a crypto citizen. Has anyone heard about this? And does anyone have any thoughts about it? Let me find the link so we can share it, ideally. Where is it? There it is. It says, just for those who might be interested in relocating to the beautiful tropical islands of Palau, the Pacific nation of Palau is kicking off the digital residency scheme for anyone wishing to become a crypto citizen. In normal times, Pacific nation of Palau was a magnet for tourists. A population of 18,000 welcomed around 100,000 yachties each year in search of remote, unspoiled beaches and pristine reefs. To protect the oceans from scuba diving tourists, most of Palau's waters were designed off limits or designated off limits for commercial fishing. And Palau's cash is drying up. Diversifying the economy without mass tourism is pressing priority for the president. Palau's trying desperately to avoid defaulting on sizable loans. There you go. So they're getting creative. So next up is from, I forget who sent it in. Most Americans think there's never been a worse time to buy a house. Somebody did a survey. The percentage of Americans who say it's a good time to buy a home hits all-time lows. The question is, what percentage of people think it's a bad time to buy a home in America? That's the question. There's your theme music. What percentage?
The idiotic
80%.
33, 35.
Correct answer coming shortly. Take a guess. Anyone want a point?
No.
No one dares to guess. Only get two guesses. Okay. The correct answer is about 70% of people think it's not a good time to buy a home, and that's a record high.
So I was close with 80.
Not far.
How can they not understand that if the dollar is devaluing and inflation is running hot at 10% and the interest rate they can borrow at is at an all-time high and they can get a 30-year fix at 3% or just ahead of that, that it's like unbelievable that they would say that. They think that the price is too high, but they don't realize that the price has gone up because the dollar has gone down.
Right. You mean the interest rates are low, yeah? So
interest rates are at historic lows, yes, and you've got a devaluing dollar because of inflation.
You said interest rates are high. I know you meant low, but it's an interesting chart. I'm retweeting it right now to the Tech News Twitter account so you can see the chart of the people who think it's a good time and a bad time. And the next one's from our friend Evan about Google drone delivery, which they have a company called Wing inside of the Alphabet umbrella. That's the W in the alphabet. Wing drone delivery heads to first U.S. metro area. The question is where? Where is Google going to test drone delivery in America starting soon? The answer is Dallas.
San Francisco?
No, not San Francisco. They need better connectivity. Too many hills. You got to have a nice flat place. Like Dallas.
Where is it?
Dallas, Texas.
Oh, Dallas. Okay.
So it's coming to Dallas soon. And then the next one is that Neil Yo, this is from our friend David in the audience, from Reuters. Neil Young strokes boomers' hearts of gold. Big U.S. banks are the new target of Neil Young's crusade against the man. The singer-songwriter from Toronto, famous for lilting melodies, is now going against the big banks. Is that what this article's trying to say? It says the singer-songwriter from Toronto is calling for baby boomers, the generation that enjoyed a gold rush of sorts, to move their vast resources out of big banks like JP Morgan, Citigroup, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo to protest climate change. He also reckons Spotify staff should quit their jobs. Oh boy. He's really doubling down.
Within the sustainability space, there is a message with regards to what banks are kind of supporting more fossil fuel investments and things like that. So I mean, he's just kind of roping up together and trying to put us boomers on, I wouldn't say on notice that we need to do better. So that's applaud him for the awareness and kind of, because it was a different time, everybody, 40 years ago, right? In so many different ways. So what we're handing over as our former capitalists and everything is gotten us to where we are now, which is not so great. We complain about it all the time because we got to fix it. So, kudos to him for sure.
The next
Hey,
one.
Tyler, did your friend Rami ever come in, by the way?
I can't tell because I'm watching articles on a screen and tabs. I'm not.
It's hard. I went once or twice back to Twitter to find it, but I didn't see him. So
okay. I imagine he would DM me if he was in the room. So the next one.
He's not in the room. I've been
okay, good. BB shares this one from Reuters that China plan bolsters cross-border payments with their new digital yuan. China will strengthen its cross-border digital yuan payment system and
dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, exactly right.
Which country do you think will be the first one?
Hong Kong. They're already testing it in Hong Kong, specifically to
Hong
test.
Kong is not over the border.
There is. You use two different passports.
Oh, okay.
As Hong Kongers are very fond of reminding people that you have two different.
Yeah.
China will strengthen its cross-border yuan payment system and explore setting up infrastructure standards for a digital fiat currency as part of a 5-year plan. To what? A 5-year plan
to take on the dollar hegemony.
For financial standardization. There's a nice euphemism if ever I heard one. Financial standardization. Make it the standard. We're not challenging nobody. It's just going to be the standard. That's all. What's wrong with that?
The standard that will be used all across Africa right. And all across the coin mixing universe.
And especially last week, signed with Argentina to build the nuclear plant. So it's actually a little breach into the America's continent, right?
Yeah. And BB also shares the next article from Nikkei Japan, very good outlet, reporting that the U.S. charges Chinese company called Hytera with conspiring to steal technology. What? Say what? Bibi, say it ain't so. Are you to expect us to believe that China is trying to steal technology, Bibi? Is that what this article is supposed to be about?
Oh, you guys from China. No. They are the honest people in the world.
Telecom equipment maker recruited Motorola employees for theft, Justice Department says. Here we go, Nikkei Japan. The U.S. Justice Department said on Monday it has brought criminal charges against China-based telecommunication company Hytera, accusing it of conspiring with former Motorola employees to steal the American company's digital mobile radio technology. In a partially redacted indictment unsealed in Chicago, the government said Shenzhen-based Hytera recruited Motorola employees to steal proprietary trade data about the radios. The incident charges Hytera by name, but it redacts the names of other co-defendants in the case, at least some of whom are the former Motorola employees the Chinese company is accusing of recruiting. The indictment says Hytera recruited Motorola employees from 2007 to 2020 and that these workers received higher salaries and benefits than what they received at Motorola in exchange for stealing trade secrets. Hytera was charged with 21 criminal counts, including conspiracy to commit theft of trade secrets. Hytera and the unidentified other defendants were also charged with possessing or attempting to possess stolen trade secrets. If convicted, Hytera would face a criminal fine of 3 times the value of the stolen trade secrets. Hytera and Motorola did not immediately respond to requests for comments. The former Motorola employees all signed confidentiality agreements at the time they were hired at Motorola and later signed non-disclosure agreements after they left the company. The indictment said it cited evidence that certain employees gained access to trade secrets through a Motorola database that they never had used in the past.
So are they saying that they own the thoughts and the knowledge of these workers, or are they saying that they specifically stole secrets? Sounds like they breached their confidentiality by going and work for a higher paying alternative.
Right, but it also says they accessed data that isn't directly related to their role at the company, meaning trade, not necessarily their thoughts. It's somebody else's thoughts in the company. It cited evidence that certain employees gained access to trade secrets through a Motorola database that they never had used in the past, meaning, it's not their files or what have you. This is, by the way, no surprise to anyone from Ottawa, Canada, or Stockholm, Sweden. Why those 2 cities? Because Ottawa was the home of Nortel, which was Canada's pride and joy, which no longer exists. And if you ask anyone who lives in Ottawa, they would tell you it's because China came in and stole all the intellectual property out of that company systematically and burnt it to the ground intellectually. People in Stockholm, Sweden know of Ericsson, which is their big pride and joy, which is also a telecommunications giant globally. And thankfully it still exists today, although Huawei did move in literally next door to Ericsson's global HQ, which is a bit far out of the center of Stockholm. So it's incredibly peculiar that Huawei would, of all the places they could choose to put their European HQ, would be precisely the exact building that is precisely, literally next door to Ericsson, and then proceed to do exactly what they did in Ottawa to Nortel, which is exactly what they're being accused of with this case with Motorola. So it seems like there's a little bit of a pattern here. Call me crazy. I'm sensing a little bit of some dots that could potentially be connected here. And I'm speaking as somebody whose my events are sponsored by Ericsson, where I often have meetings where they often have to go to great lengths to confirm that I'm not there to steal intellectual property because of their neighbor. So the next one's from BV, from Reuters, that religious leaders are now calling on Mr. Mark Zuckerberg to scrap Instagram Kids' plans. Reverends, rabbis, and other religious leaders urged Meta's chief executive officer, Mark Zuckerberg, to permanently stop the company's plans for Instagram for Kids. And that would be a little ironic if the Catholic Church joined that particular initiative.
Funny.
That would be just a little too ironic for me. But it did say reverends and rabbis. It didn't say cardinals or popes. So let's hope that the Catholic Church has enough awareness to not involve themselves with that initiative. The next one is we covered the UK porn sites. We'll do age verification, and then BB has this one from the BBC. You did it again, BB. Paralyzed man with a severed spine walks again thanks to an implant. World's first electronic implant developed by a team of Swiss researchers allows Michael Roccati, who was paralyzed after a motorbike accident 5 years ago, to walk again for the first time. Pretty amazing. Severed spinal cord has been able to walk again thanks to an implant. Yeah.
This can save a lot of people's lives because they don't need to depend on others' help or less help. Yeah.
Right. Next, from our friend Jay, who works at Grab there out of Singapore, that humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross, for example, keep getting hacked because they can't afford security, basically, because they're like the nonprofits who spend all their money in the right places and they're not spending it on digital cybersecurity, and that's why they're continually getting hacked and everything else. Many organizations take a more is better approach to data gathering it without knowing why or what it would be used for. That data can be a liability for them and put people at risk if malicious actors get a hold of it. Quote, they have the resources of mall cops to protect against a cyber hacking equivalent of Delta Force. That's my favorite quote of the day. And the next is from David Crace from CNBC, that the world is hungry for lithium. Geothermal energy could transform how we extract lithium. Concerns around sustainability and the security of global supply chains could boost opportunities related to direct lithium extraction. Indeed, we're going to have to figure out how to make batteries greener, or the extraction of the necessary elements to build the batteries greener. And last but not least, because I saved it because I was hoping my old buddy Rami Jaffe would join us. Unfortunately, you know what I'm realizing? He's probably very sound asleep now that I look at the clock in the West Coast. Assuming he's on the West Coast because he travels a lot. That the Foo Fighters to perform a virtual reality show after the Super Bowl. The world-famous U.S. rock group said that the streaming event would allow viewers to watch them from the front row. So if you're wearing a VR headset during the Super Bowl, you can be virtually on stage with Dave and the boys and my buddy Rami. And that sounds like a very cool new way to do the Super Bowl halftime show via VR with the Foos. Consider this your free front row ticket to rock out with legendary rock and roll Hall of Famers. The Super Bowl is due to take place at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California. It was previously announced that Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, and Kendrick Lamar would perform during the game's halftime show. And looks like the Foo Fighters are taking over the responsibilities for that one. So that could be kind of cool to see how that works in VR, because we can expect to see a whole lot more of that in the days and weeks and months and years to come, which is VR concerts with high-profile bands where you can enjoy being in the front row from the comfort of your mama's basement. No disrespect to anyone living in their mom's basements.
Yeah,
Nice.
I believe, Tyler, I believe that you need a Quest 2 headset in order to see it. And they haven't said if it's going to be on any VR platform. They might just be creating a platform for it. The other thing is, well, that's it, basically. Thanks.
You're very welcome. Okay, and thank you to Dr. Fran for sharing that awesome article. No doubt I'll be chatting with Rami most certainly before we meet again next time, and I'll just see if he's got any thoughts. I don't think he has any thoughts on the VR part of this is kind of not, that's somebody else's responsibility, obviously. But maybe he does know something that he could add a little context to. Maybe there's something they're going to have to do different on stage, because there'll be these cameras on stage, but I don't think that'll really impact their performance.
I'm more interested in the crowd,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the experience. Is that if you're, how actually looking at the band? Well, okay, that's going to maybe you'll have a 360 or 180 degree sort of view of the stage, but it's going to be very much like just watching a stream of it. The difference is, if you look to your left and look to your right, where are you? What's behind you? What's in the background? Where's the crowd? That's the ambience of going and seeing somebody live. So how they implement that is the most interest to me.
Did they say nobody's going to be at the venue, like physically?
No, it doesn't say, but that's a great question. I imagine people would be able to be at the Super Bowl because they're at the games leading up to the Super Bowl, aren't they?
Yeah,
Well,
so I think
that
that
was what I was going to say, but when I forgot what I was going to say,
right.
is there's no way of knowing whether this will be a green screen production. In other words, the group will be performing live somewhere with a background, or if they're going to create avatars for them, and it will be really a fully immersive thing, so that if you bring your Quest avatar into the venue, there will be people around you. But they're not saying that yet.
Yeah, a lot of the VR, I think, implementations are also, they're setting up a venue so that you can, even if you do go there, you're able to see more. It's almost like putting 3D glasses on in a movie. You're able to see more happening, while you're there too. So it could be a combination of both.
Okay. Alrighty. We're going to hang it there until tomorrow, and hope you join us. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. It was a fun one, I got to say, and learned a lot as always. So we'll see you mañana.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Be
Tyler.
good.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, Tyler. Thank you,
Got to
everyone.
start up. Goodbye.